Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Agile workshop today. So we are pleased to invite one of our alumni. I didn't know that Luke, you study at Swinburne. So we are
Yeah,
in
a
the
long time
same
ago.
long time ago, similar to me. So anyway, we would love to invite Luke to introduce himself, and then he will look after this meeting. But I just come here to shortly introduce myself for those who are not familiar to this program and who we are. So, Shaping STEM Futures program is an initiative that us, a group of educators across different disciplines, offer to the students. Why? Because we do care about your learning, your experience, and how, as a graduate, you are going to be confident to meet the requirements of the industry. So, it's kind of a bridge between what we are doing in the academic setting and what our industry partners are required. So maybe internship placement is an option for all of the students. So providing this type of a workshop or panel discussion, inviting guest speaker, industry partners, and for brainstorming, for sharing the experience, or a training of something which is very essential. So that's what we think that is going to empower our students. So if you are here for coming from different disciplines, you're welcome to come to this Agile workshop, which is a first workshop as one of the workshops we offer in Design for Change competition. Again, that is our annual competition, which students are coming as a team or as an individual, submit their 4-minute video of their product. And what is that product? It's your design solution to the real challenge. So again, we want to make sure that you are having enough opportunity to be trained, and we make that bridge with the industry so you can be in the better position to know about yourself and being aware of your career identity, and also being able to successfully attend in the interview and find your favorite job. So with this introduction to this first workshop, I would like to invite Luke to introduce yourself and take us to the Agile workshop. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter. Thank you, everyone, for joining us online today. So I'm Luke Benson. I'm the head of risk and technology for TMR Global. I also work as a product owner for NAB. So fairly busy. My background. So as mentioned earlier, I'm a Swinburne alumni. I studied in Swinburne, so I just need to check the details on the wall. 2006 was my graduation year, so it was quite some time ago. But I've been an IT professional, predominantly within the project delivery landscape, for over 25 years. Um, so in that time, I worked across a number of methodologies. I've done a number of, simple through to complex deliveries. I've worked in, down at the front lines of being a software developer. I've been a business analyst. I've been an information analyst, business architect, solution architect, product owner, and I've even worked in internal audit. So I've got a huge breadth of professional experience. Uh, But a little while ago, I did have a what makes me happy professionally moment, and one of the things that I really really do enjoy professionally is working with high performance teams to deliver complex solutions. And the way that we do that now is that we use the Agile methodology. So what we'll do is we'll start sharing the screen. We've got a PowerPoint pack to run through. Um, Please feel free to ask questions during the presentation. This is not a one-way street. So if you have any questions, I will hopefully have the answer for you later in the pack. If I don't, I'll make it up on the spot. But I do encourage interaction. I do encourage questions. So please feel free to do so. So without further ado, let's get started on the introduction to Agile. So hopefully that screen share's come through okay. Great news. All right. So intro to Agile. So I've been working in Agile for a number of years now. So that's probably not too much to tell you there. But I think the first part of this message, which I think is critical to understand, is that Agile is a delivery methodology. Right. So for those of you who are in the software world, in my little if statement, if Agile is not a delivery methodology, then you're wrong. I'm like, this is as blunt as I can put it. Uh, Agile at its heart is a methodology we use to break down or chunk down the work into sizable, incremental, deliverable components and then push that out in as rapidly as we can to our customers. It is not a free-for-all where the person in the product owner role can change their mind on a whim and just say, well, we're doing it in an agile way. It's not what agile is at all. Agile is quite a strict delivery methodology, which is backed with routine and consistent effort. So, putting this into comparison, um, when I started working as an IT professional, waterfall was still all the rage. So this is going back quite a long time. So the waterfall delivery methodology uh, was one where we would all sit down and we would work on a product specification or a detailed specification, and that might take 6 to 8 months worth of effort to refine and work and get this thing into absolute perfect shape. And then we'd give that specification to the development team, and they would go and work through that development. They would build the software and they'd produce a solution. It'd be full of bugs and it'd be an absolute mess. But that would be delivered sometime later. So it could be, a year and a half or something in between concept to delivered software, if it worked. The difference that we have with Agile is that we actually look at what we're trying to get to. We break that down into deliverable components and we incrementally add the value along the way. And the overall goal of it is to be able to not necessarily make wild decisions and redirections, but to bump the overall solution into shape through review and customer feedback. So, I really want to reiterate again on this that Agile is not just this free-for-all decision-making routine. This is the industry standard for delivery. It's a delivery methodology that we now use predominantly throughout the software world. So if you're not familiar with Agile, then you will need to be because this is the environment you will be working into. Okay, so going through that, so I've just mentioned Agile is not a free pass to kind of do whatever. There is flexibility in it, but there are a few very important parts to this. The first part, I think, is that whenever you're working in Agile, you really want a multifunctional team, right? So my roles currently is a product owner. So I'm the voice of the customer. I'm the interface between the customer and the team. I'm the prioritizer and the protector of the team. My job is to make sure that people aren't circumventing the agile process, that any inquiries or details or requests come to me as the product owner. They don't bypass me and go straight to a developer with a new idea hey, can you just do this for me? My job as a product owner is to stop that, is to help shape the product and shape the backlog and shape and prioritize the work. We also have Scrum Masters who operationally execute the sprints and the iterations, right? So they're there to really help us execute and run the thing. And then we have our squad. And our squad is comprised of business analysts, developers, testers, UX, UI professionals, accessibility people, like, whoever we actually need. These are the multifunctional components that we actually grab. So typically a squad, in an ideal world is no bigger than 10 people. If you're dealing with a squad bigger than 10, then that's a lot to manage. It takes a long time to get through stand-ups. So the multifunctional team's really important and understanding your role within it, but also understanding that you can change your role within the team. So having, business analysts that are detailed and technically aware is a really, really incredibly powerful thing. The next most important thing, and this is I think one of the core parts of Agile that does get skipped, and it's called the vision. So in a nutshell, the vision is, what are you actually trying to build? What are you delivering? What is it? How does it run? What's it look like? And what underlying asset and infrastructure does it actually operate on? What purpose does it serve? The vision answers those high level questions and then breaks down, a little bit further. You don't want to necessarily get into the minutia level of detail for what you're doing, but this is the ultimately the guiding principle of the asset that you're building in software delivery or in anything else that you're doing with the delivery methodology. Without the vision, you don't have the guidance to steer the team. Right? You can end up in that free for all where the product owner is just making decisions because it's how they feel. That's as far away from agile as you actually want. You do not want to be in that position, working in a team where that's the case. So the vision is critical, and it can be a little bit lighter, it can be a little bit, heavier and more detailed. It can be quite a detailed product specification, but it needs to exist. If you're working without a vision, then you're not necessarily working to a easily communicatable common goal. Right. So that's kind of why it exists. The work breakdown structure is kind of, one of the next important priorities of Agile. This covers things like how do you take the vision and then break it down into deliverable value adding chunks? We use terminology here like epics, features, stories, and tasks. This is essentially how we look at the components of the vision and we say, well, we think our customers or whoever we're delivering this asset to will like to see these things first. So if you're building a banking application, for example, one of the first things that you should be able to show your customer is that it's secure. So the first priority that we're going to do is, for example, deliver the authentication layer. We're going to deliver the ability to log in or create an account or whatever that is, right? So um, then we will incrementally add banking value. But I always kind of take that work breakdown structure is done not only in terms of taking big complex things and breaking them into smaller chunks, but it's also prioritizing them and making sure that the things that the customer value are the things that they see as quickly as possible. Right, so then we have our sprint rules and cadence. This is really important from an operational perspective. So, this is how we go about things like story point, like grooming, our estimation. What's our kickoff? For example, do we run a sprint every 2 weeks, or is the sprint slash iteration? That's a common term that you'll come across. All of these rules are agreed and defined. It's effectively an internal contract that you all agree to say, this is how we are going to operate and this is how we're going to improve. And finally, we have the capacity plan and velocity. Now, these two terms are like they're terms that I'm aware of and use as a product owner. And I think it's important to certainly understand them. You don't need to necessarily master them, but understanding them in the agile landscape is really important because it's how we optimize the team, and it's how we, at that leadership level of a project or a program, forecast when we're actually going to deliver, and it gives us confidence and some accuracy as to, can we achieve everything that the vision is setting us out to achieve? So those, I think, are the critical dependencies to be aware of in the agile space. And this is not necessarily going to be a comprehensive list. This is not a comprehensive course on agile, but walking out of this, you should be able to understand and relate to all of these terms, which you will use in an agile delivery space. All right, let's get on to that multifunctional team. So the multifunctional team, as I mentioned earlier, has different roles within it. There are a few predefined ones, the product owner, Scrum Master, which I've already kind of touched on. Um, but I'd like to just focus a little bit more on the squad, right? So having a multifunctional team is not necessarily having exactly three developers and exactly one tester and exactly one BA. In a super ideal world, all of those squad members can cover each other's back, right? So if we've got a really big push to get a lot of work through, testing's under the pump, well, can our business analysts jump over and assist testing? Can they perform the user acceptance testing, the UAT? If yes, great. So they're being a little bit more multifunctional than just performing their only role. There's a term that we also do refer to as the three amigos, which is where we will bring a software developer, a tester, and a BA together to co-locate and co-work on one particular item at a time. For really, really complex things, we use that technique of saying, well, this is so hard, but we've got to get the throughput. So let's put the communication of the business requirements directly with the developer, direct with the tester. So all of their independent actions can all happen on the same task concurrently. Right? So we use these techniques which are available to us because our team is flexible and has, some multi-functionality baked in with the people that we surround ourselves with. So I won't dwell too much on this, but yeah, I do want to highlight again that if you've got a really good BA within a agile squad, they're a little bit technical, they're a little bit businessy, they've got that really good breadth of coverage. I really enjoyed my time working as a business analyst because I could take my technical knowledge and bring it into the communication with the developers and the testers, and so I could play quite a big multifunctional role. Um, so yeah, I think we'll move on from that, but that's just be prepared to do a little bit more or something a little bit different than a specific predefined role if you're working within a squad. Very, very helpful for delivery. Okay, so we're going to highlight now the vision, right? And I will harp on about the importance of this for a long time. This is one of the most critical, and it can also be one of the most overlooked areas of an agile delivery, right? So think of it this way. Your vision translates an idea into a target state. So for me, we work within the tools that we have um, available to us. So the vision can be, documented out in Confluence, or it could be, and a lot of times I do this myself. It could be a PowerPoint pack that describes the high level architecture, the thing we're trying to achieve, how data flows in between assets. We get into some level of detail, but not a huge level of detail. The biggest vision document that I've ever prepared myself personally has been 50 PowerPoint slides long. And I like PowerPoint personally because I can draw in it easily and make notes and make a bit of a mess of things. Um, but by the time I bump it into shape, we've got a very clear view of the asset that we're trying to achieve. Like I can write notes, I can draw the intended pages and the workflows and things like that within it. And it's also standardized across literally every PC in the world. So it's a handy tool to draw a vision out in, right? But you're answering a number of high level questions. You're setting the scene and the background and jumping into not a super detailed level of information about what you're delivering, but there is enough there that if you gave this content to somebody, they could be onboarded into your squad or your team, read the vision, understand what they are doing and what they are delivering, and then get to work on it, right? So they know that what the solution is actually doing, where the code is, how it works, how it runs, who the solution is for, what are the key aspects of the solution, etc., etc. Right? In my view, the vision is absolutely mandatory. If you do not have a vision available for the thing that you are working on, then the squad itself is a bit blind, right? You're operating at the whim of a product owner who could just be changing their mind based on how they're feeling during the day. And in the early years of agile adoption, we did see a lot of that. So, as agile has matured as a methodology in this space, the use of the vision, is also one of those really, really, really critical things that you should be able to say, look, hand up, I'm new to the team. Have we got a vision pack? Have we got some detail about what we are actually delivering? And if you don't, then start sketching one up because all of a sudden you'll be turned to quite quickly as the person who understands the plan just by drawing the simple picture of what is the target state of this thing that you're actually trying to create. You know, again, the vision is critically important. So, um, yeah, let's move on from that one.
Um, Look, I just want to maybe raise this question. Maybe you
Hmm,
already discussed it because you are working with students and supervising a few of them during the internship. What is your perspective and your view of working with students and how just for something like let's say for the vision
hmm.
and what is your recommendation for them how okay with this knowledge is knowing this knowledge is one thing how we can work on it and improve it and we can it's I think that's another aspect so what is your observation and recommendation for this.
Yep. So, like, I think to me, if like when working with a student group, um, I tend to come prepared with the vision statement already organized. Um, and the reason that I do that is that it optimizes my time in terms of onboarding the student body into the project or the deliverable that we're working on. Um, and it also gives us the point of reference or the plan of like, this is what we're aiming for. And I can hold that session with the students literally on day one, right? So it's ultimately an alignment tool from my perspective of saying if there are any ever questions about what we're trying to do or what we're trying to deliver, just check out, have a look at the vision. Um, I thought I'd quickly go and have a look and see if I've got one really quickly available. Um, so we ran a project recently where we built an application called uh, therapy matchup. So the idea of therapy matchup was that specialist therapists, such as speech therapists, occupational therapists, uh, uh, psychologists, etc., um, are all like they're known professional therapists that work in the community, but they're not necessarily uh, internet savvy. They can't advertise themselves. So, a speech therapist friend of mine came up with the idea of saying, "Can we launch this? How hard would it be to create a product kind of like um, uh, High Pages or something, but for therapists?" And I said, "You know what? That project's got some social good. Let me sketch this thing up." So out of that sketch, we built. Nope, that's not the pack. out of that discussion, we built. Let me see if I got it here. Um, I'll have to keep looking for it. But out of that discussion, we sat down and we built an entire specification saying, look, here's the flow, here's the process, this is the expected customer flow, these are the roles, etc., etc. So we built that out and prepared it. We looked at each other and we said, "Yep, we think that's basically what this solution would be." And we used that as part of the onboarding for the Swinburne team. So in my experience, we come prepared with the vision document already available, and it should exist. It should exist before a project team has stood up. So if you are working in the project space in agile delivery, this is something that should exist for you. If it doesn't exist, then ask the question. See if you can help to create it. Like it is an absolute critical asset in my view. I'll have to keep looking for it. I'll find it somewhere. It
Okay,
exists
thank
somewhere on my computer.
you.
All right. So let's jump into the next stage or the next part of the agile deliveries, which is the backlog. So the backlog is basically the work breakdown structure. So it's the acronym WBS. So it's a work breakdown structure of prioritized work. The trick with the backlog is that we don't necessarily break down everything all at once. There's no point running into the 99th degree of like the lowest priority thing in the world and just going, well, we don't need to know that. We don't need that for day one, right? If we look at our vision and we say, what are the most important parts? What's the baseline thing that we could do to show to a customer? Well, let's focus on that part first, right? And what we might do is to say, well, the entire backlog is essentially the vision. When we start breaking this thing out, we say, all right, well, let's perhaps start on a web platform where we have authentication and some back-end functionality. Well, the first part of it could be let's set up our infrastructure and let's set up the base skeleton of our web application and the authentication layer. All right. So in my mind, that might be epic one, right? That's a big chunk of work. That might be 2, 3 months worth of work in total is our estimate. And during that time, I would say, well, let's start working on feature one and feature two now, right? So feature one might be the underlying assets that the application is going to run on. What's the CI/CD pipeline? What's the code base? Where's it stored? What's the hosting platform, et cetera, et cetera. Feature two might be, well, let's get the bare bones of a public website available. Let's get the authentication process in. Let's get the underlying database deployed, et cetera, et cetera. Right? If that's our strategy and our approach, we need to know the detail of those things now. They're really, really, really important. What I don't need to know the detail about is the underlying features of the platform that we're ultimately going to build. I can have a high level idea. I might actually say, well, features 1 through to 10 might come through an Epic 2, and that's 2 to 3 months worth of work. And, that's going to be a couple of features in terms of overall estimated size. But on day one, that's the amount of detail that I have there is no more than one line. I do not need to know the work breakdown structure of that content. I have got tons to work on and I've got tons to get through. So having the work breakdown structure kind of built this way is a way of breaking down the work according to the priorities set by the product owner. Um, and it's done with the right amount of detail at the right time. You can certainly have a forward view of what it is that you need to deliver, but you do not need the detailed analysis. You do not need the estimation on these things that are 90 days away. You will get to that level of analysis and you will get to do the estimation for them, but you do not need them day one. So don't waste your time on it. Right. So the backlog is basically how we break down our work into sizable chunks. And what we deliver out of these sizable chunks are user stories. Right. So the user story is how we communicate. This is what a user wants. the user stories roll up into a feature. So a feature might have, 1 to 100 user stories. That's fairly big. But then an epic might be an aggregation of 3 features. So it could be 300 stories deep, right? So it just depends on the work breakdown structure. All right. So let's dive in a little bit more to the user story. So I'm an old business analyst, so I got pretty good at writing these. Um, and one of there is a dark art to it. It's not just a really simple task, but uh, there is a bit of a dark art where you always need to take the customer perspective. Where absolutely possible, this is how you do it, right? So we use the terminology, and I think that there is a term for it. So like a full Agile course will probably cover this, but we write our user stories with a terminology of as a, I want, so that. You do get a bit sick of copying, pasting those things into into user stories, but like that is your template for a user story. And the other thing that we also add to it is acceptance criteria, which is given when then, and also then again. So one user story can have multiple acceptance criteria. We can't tick off a user story as being complete until the acceptance criteria is met. So if we have a look at the example that I've written on the right? So this is and remember, user story is from the perspective of the user. It's not the product owner's wish. It's not as a system. I know that you will probably see that, but it should always be from the user perspective. So we'll read through this because I think it has a couple of perspectives. So the first one here. So as a new user to the application, cool. All right. Well, I already know that this is someone coming in from the public landing zone of our application. I want to log in with username and password. Cool, right? So I know I need to authenticate so that I can see my dashboard and navigate to subsequent services. Cool. So I've got a user, navigates from public into the login page, and the login page, when passes, probably goes to a user dashboard. Right. So I've described exactly what the user is going to do. How do I accept this story? My acceptance criteria AC1 invalid credentials. Given the user navigates to the login when they provide incorrect credentials, then show an ambiguous message, username or password is incorrect. Cool, right? That's something we can test. The acceptance criteria gives us the test cases that we're then going to execute. Then we're going to test for valid credentials. So I use the correct username and password. I'm navigated over to my dashboard. Cool. Dashboard population, if the user's authenticated and they go through to the dashboard, I see, components 1, 2, 3, and a role-based access control, restricted menu and profile and logout navigation stuff, right? So if you're successfully authenticated, once there's a dashboard that shows 3 things, it's got role-based access control menu, and I can log out, right? So that's fairly standard. Then AC4 is if I hijack the URL. So let's say that I just write the URL for the homepage and try to come in, then the system will say, no, you're not authenticated, and it will, pass me over to the login screen. Right. So for me, I've taken the user perspective. I know the 4 things that I'm asking to say, I need to do all of these 4 things before I can mark this story as complete. The software developer should be able to read that, understand that within the context of where they are in the application, based on the top part of the user story, and then write their software to meet that acceptance criteria. Right? Only when all 4 of those acceptance criteria are met, then this story can proceed towards completion. Right, so that's kind of how we do our work breakdown structure. It's the smallest chunk that we can actually do that contributes into a pile of features, and those pile of features deliver a unit of work of value, and they ultimately roll up to an epic, which is a big chunk of work, right? So those terms, please be familiar with them, but also please be familiar with the user story structure and how they work and how they're intended to be written. All right. let's get on to this before we can, so grooming and estimation. So, as mentioned earlier, Agile is it's a methodology for delivery, right? It's got a specific cadence that you have to work to, and you have to go through this process. So, as part of every sprint, you should be in the routine of grooming and estimation. The next sprint or the next two sprints work in front of you, right? It's the right amount of detail at the right time. There's no point grooming and estimating like the last thing to ever be delivered when you're on day one of the project, right? You need to groom and estimate the priorities, which are determined by the product owner and fed through from the business. So, what is grooming? So, grooming is the preparation of the story and any supportive artifacts. When we think of supportive artifacts, we think of what's the UI look like? Have we got any details about the theme or the branding or the fonts that we need to use or the toolkit? Any of these questions, these are technical questions that we bring out during grooming. So we want to make sure that the story has sufficient information. It's actually written correctly and we know exactly what we are delivering, right? So one of the reasons I wanted to read through the prior story, and I'll go back to it for a reason, is that in the grooming exercise, a senior developer or anyone that's working on this would actually like raise their concern that that story that we just looked at is not correct. Right. So let's go back to it. I think this is really important. So if I was presented with this story as part of grooming, because I then need to estimate how many points worth of work I'm going to actually say this thing's worth. We can say, all right, as a new user, I want to log in and I want to see my dashboard. Cool, I've got it. Right. When I log in with invalid credentials, yeah, I agree with that. That makes sense in alignment with this story. I want to check valid credentials. Yep, I agree. Dashboard population. AC3, acceptance criteria 3 is a bunch of requirements about the dashboard. This user story is simply to manage the login and login of an authenticated user, username, password. In my view, as a developer, can we please take AC3 out and can we please move it into a separate story, which is related to the content and detail displayed on the dashboard for an authenticated user? So in that example of grooming, we've come through and said, yeah, yeah, I get it. But code-wise, we're actually talking about two separate areas of the application. We're talking about the authentication experience and the dashboard. They're two separate areas of code. So let's not kind of cross over the story. So I, as a developer, now have to context switch in between different areas of the code. I can manage your authentication flows. I can manage the overall security, but I don't necessarily want to also spend my time working on making sure that the dashboard components are all there, the role-based access control menu of the dashboard, etc., all exists. Not in this story. Let's get this one done as a small increment of work, and then let's invest time in a separate story about populating the dashboard. Right? So grooming is not necessarily blind acceptance. It's looking at understanding, but also thinking contextually. What area of code are you actually going to be working on here? Because you want to keep these things tight. You want to keep it really, really close and condensed. Otherwise, you might end up with 40 different areas of the overall software solution being open and exposed and then trying to merge all that. It turns into a big mess. So keep it very, very tight, keep it very, very small. That's what you should be doing in grooming. Then we come through to estimation. So we think, yeah, actually, we've got this thing looking good. The story looks right. There's enough information there for me to pick it up and start working on it. Now we're actually going to estimate this thing. Estimation's typically done on a Fibonacci sequence, which is, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, et cetera, right? So we're just basically saying that we think it's this many points. The concept of points was always a bit of a confusing one for me when I first started with Agile. Um, but effectively, it's an agreed unit of measure. And we might say that, 1 point equals 1 developer day, or 1 point is half a developer day, which, then says that, we estimate that someone can get through 2 points worth of work within one day. Whatever it is, right? It's the important thing is that it's agreed. And we all agree that 2 points means 1 day's worth of work. 1 point is the AM component of the day, 9 to 12. The second point is, 1 to 5. Whatever it is, it's agreed, and the whole team works to that point's understanding. It's how we communicate the size. So estimation, we might all sit like there are a number of ways you can do it. There's good old party poker where we all sit around and we say, well, now that we've groomed all those stories, how big do you think they are? Story one, and everyone, holds up a finger and they go, oh, it's 3 points. And if we don't get agreement with the group, then someone's got a different opinion. Why do you have a different opinion? All right, let's try again. What do we all think? Oh yeah, we all agree it's three. It's 3 points, right? Moving on, right? It should be a fairly quick exercise, but all we're trying to do is find that agreed estimation based on our experience of working in this place before. So that's all we're doing when we're estimating those stories. But you have to have them groomed first. Grooming, then estimation. All right. Definition of done. This is an important part. So let's say that we've picked up a story and we've actually worked it. We've done our software delivery and we're ready. This is going to be committed into the master branch and released as part of our build. Is it really done? That's one of the questions that we need to ask ourselves. A part of the agile methodology, we have this term called definition done, or the DOD. So uh, just as I mentioned earlier that, like the estimation's done with an agreed size. We all agree that 2 points represents this amount of effort. The definition of done is essentially the contract that we all agree to say that we need to do all of these things before we can move a story or a feature or an epic to complete, right? So the DOD effectively is something where we say, like at a story level, we might say that all code is peer reviewed. We have unit tests written and they're put into the automation suite. We've also passed the code through an AI optimization. We've merged into master, and QA and user acceptance testing has been passed by independent testers. That's just an example, right? So if I had my story that we looked at before, being able to log in with, valid and invalid credentials, then I'd write my code, I'd get it peer reviewed from someone else, I'd have automated unit tests and regression tests for authenticating successfully, failing the authentication, then making sure that if I tried to get in with an unauthenticated token, then I'd be bounced back out to the login screen. That can all be tested or in an automated way. So, cool. Like I've got the tests written and automated to do that. My code is successfully merged into the master branch and it has been reviewed by UAT and accepted by the independent testers. I am now ready to move that story to complete and go and get another story. I work the story that I have until it is complete or until I'm blocked and I need to go and do something else. So the definition of done is the agreed contract that every single story goes through that process. We need to complete the DOD for everything. It's all about the execution of the methodology because executing all of those things will deliver a high, I hate to use the term a high quality of code, but it will deliver a consistent solution in terms of software and code and deliverable. All right. And as we go up the chain, from story to feature to epic, the definition of done shrinks a little bit and they change a little bit, but we should consider a definition of done at each of those layers. right? So, we agree that in order to complete a feature, that all stories have to be 100% complete. The feature is released into the hands of the production user or is in the production pipeline. So you would write and agree with to that definition of done before the keyboard, starts getting touched, right? It's part of the contract of how you work and deliver in an agile methodology. Similarly, we have sprint rules, right? So these are the rules that we all agree to adhere to, right? This is how we set our cadence overall. So our cadence and sprint rules, these are the things that we agree to do every sprint, right? Agile is not a process where you can do whatever you want. Agile is a delivery methodology. And according to that methodology, we agree to do these things every single sprint, right? So in every sprint, for example, we might say all planned stories must be complete. All development must include unit tests. All unit tests must pass. Daily stand-ups will happen at 10 a.m. Daily stand-ups will cover these things. Sprints are 2 weeks long. Story points are these things. Where possible, actions from retrospectives are completed within 3 days of the next sprint's commencement, right? This is our contract to ourselves of how we are going to operate in an agile methodology, right? So be familiar with this. Sometimes this is documented, sometimes you just kind of step into it, and that is what it is. With a really high performing team, this is documented and it's known and everyone works to it. All right, so we're getting on to the last of the kind of, listening to me bits, which is the capacity plan and velocity. So during the introduction, we sort of introduced the fact that this is the stuff we use in the leadership levels to forecast how much work we can do and how fast we're doing it, which ultimately gives us confidence in the delivery and the delivery date. All right, so if we think about all of the concepts we've actually gone through, all I'm doing is saying for a capacity plan, I'm looking at my team and based on my team, knowing that we consider one day is worth 2 points. So if I say one day's worth 2 points and I have 20 people available, in theory, I've got 40 points I can work with over the course of a iteration. Knowing that I've got 40 points worth of work that I can squeeze in, looking at my estimated work in front of me, right? So my groomed and estimated work, I can put a fairly high degree of certainty that I'll be able to deliver my final solution. I can deliver these features by this date, right? So I'm using my capacity plan of how much work I can actually do, and then using that to forecast when I think work can be done. And the way that I also do that is I use this term called velocity. So capacity plan looks forward, how much work could I possibly do? Velocity looks backwards and says, well, based on what the team has delivered, here's how many points we're actually getting through. Because you might not get through all of the iteration, right? You might not get through all of the planned stories, or you might actually do a few more, right? You might actually be over delivering. You might be pulling stories in because you have the capacity to do so. So the velocity is the measure of that. So we can use these two metrics, this forward view and this prior delivery history, to then say, well, our overall estimation of this vision is, like 1,000 points or something. Now, if I'm able to deliver 50 points a sprint, and I just play that forward because I'm looking at how much the team is actually delivering based on the velocity, then I can predict the completion date for all of that known work. Right, so I use the combination of those two things. Your capacity plan is how much work you think you can get in. Your velocity is how much you have actually done in the past, and you use those two metrics to predict the future. Right? They're handy tools to be aware of, and for someone that's really good at it, which we'll see next, is that we don't just go, oh, it's 2 points per week and there's 5 working days per week and therefore just multiply it out. That's not necessarily how it works in the real world. Um, so what we'll do is we'll have a quick look at an example sprint cadence, right? So again, this is assuming a 2 week sprint or a 2 week iteration, right? So those terms are interchangeable. And this is how the team agrees to work. Right, so let's hypothetically say I have a team of 10 just for easy maths. We start our sprint on Monday, right? So week one, Monday. Um, the product owner will accept any vision amendments or product alignment discussion, whatever it is, Monday through Wednesday, right? Because if there are any changes or anything that we need to bump into alignment, this sprint is already underway. We need to worry about it next sprint unless there's something really catastrophic, right? So we want to know about that as early as possible, but this is what we're typically going to do. So we start our sprint, we try and deliver any sprint improvements as early as possible and basically, get that kind of done. But we work on our backlog development, our test, and now ultimately our code commit, right? So when we look at this period of time that we've actually got reserved for development, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. All right, 5 days, cool. Then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but only half a day on Thursday and no code going in on Friday. Why? Why aren't you guys working 10 days a fortnight? Well, the answer is that your time actually gets chewed up doing these other things. Developers are included in grooming. They're included in estimation, right? They have the build and the release to take care of. So we don't necessarily include that time in our capacity plan. So we might actually work out that, by the time we've kind of mucked around with all of these things that have to happen, that the overall working duration, and therefore the points that each user can, each member of the team can deliver, is not actually 10 per iteration. It's more like 8. And then if we have a public holiday or something like that else coming up, we know that that's going to reduce our capacity again, right? So we forward plan knowing that we've got these variables to work with within the capacity plan. So the off-the-cuff calculation, good rough guide, but someone who's very good at it will look forward and understand that, when people got leave, what holidays are coming up, what work needs to go on in each iteration, because we need to account for it, because ultimately that slows down or reduces the points available for development. My job as a product owner and to working with the BAs is to clear as much of the pathway as possible, right? To make sure that this backlog development test and commit time is as big as possible. But I still need you in grooming. I still need you in estimation. I still need the production build. I still need the release. We still need to do a retrospective and you still need to showcase. All of those things take away from your software development time. So we need to be aware of it and it needs to play a part in the capacity plan and assessment of, what's the actual velocity. If I can fine tune and tweak and improve that development period, right? So maybe we can squeeze grooming into Friday and estimation to Friday as well. So like this is not half a day, this becomes a full day of development. Then our velocity will increase because I've got more availability to do more software development. And using those two metrics, I can then hopefully bring the forecasted completion date in. Right. So it's using these metrics and this knowledge of what does the sprint cadence look like? How does it work? And then going, well, what's the data underneath it telling me? And how does that give you confidence in delivery? All right. Okay, so before we have a look at one of the final slides here, which is, how do I kind of summarize Agile in a nutshell? We'll spend a bit of time on the retro, Right, so the retrospective, I've got in great big words there. That's the secret to a high performing team. Right, so I do a couple of things in a retro. Standard retro, who's there, right? Get a log of who attended the retro. Um, I actually like to let my teams run with a sprint champion nomination, right? So the idea there is to say, floor's open, guys. Tell me who helped you the most, who did something really great, right? Um, it's a nice, helpful key to building a strong, high-performing team is to have the team praise themselves and to thank themselves for going the extra mile, right? So sprint champion, I don't know, gets a 5 pats on the back and maybe a free beer or whatever it is, a reward and recognition call out depending on the business you're working for. But the sprint champion should be called out for each sprint because someone somewhere has gone the extra mile to help someone else. So recognize them, right? Then standard parts of a retro. What went well? What can you improve? What do you want to avoid? They're the three things that you need to ask in a retro. And you'll get a ton of different opinions and views there, right? And out of that feedback, what actions are you going to take to improve the sprint? Now, those actions can go to the PO, they can go to the devs, there might be DevOps problems. For example, what can we improve? Stability of the build pipeline. Cool. Product owner, go and spend some time with DevOps and see what's going wrong and see if we can fix that up because it's costing us 2 days to build instead of 1 day to build. You got it? I'm going to go work on that for you and hopefully we'll have it fixed next week. Right. So the retrospective is key. It's where you find out what people don't like, why they're having issues, etc., etc., and it gives you those targeted things that you're going to hold yourself to account to try and resolve for them to unlock the delivery. If you can unlock the delivery, then you increase your velocity. Increase the velocity gives you greater certainty in your delivery using your capacity plan and knowing how much work that you can take on. Right, so all these things work together to allow you to deliver in Agile. All right, final slide for the pack. Now, I've been carrying on for a while, but final slide here is that what does Agile look like in a nutshell? All right, I think this is a great picture because Agile takes this idea, converts it into a vision, right? And the vision can evolve. You get feedback and you can bump it into shape. You can change your mind a little bit, but the vision is that idea. What does it now look like? We then take that vision and we turn it into the product backlog, which is a big work breakdown structure of the WBS, right? So it's a breakdown of the epics and features and stories to convert that vision into something. We then prioritize that backlog and we enter sprints, right? So a sprint is that routine of going through the design, the develop, the test, deploy, review, launch. At the end of each sprint, we should have a shippable component. It should go to production. It needs to go to the customer's hand. That's the idea of it. Small incremental delivery value add. At the end of the delivered value, we showcase. This is really important, right? So um, I do get asked why, how did I become such a good public presenter, right? Because I present to all sorts of people and we run town halls and things in the banks and I'll naturally stand up and present. I got good at presenting because I experimented and I learned during showcase. One of the most interesting experiences we had here was having one of our testers, very quiet, very reserved gentleman, um, very good tester, but getting him to stand up in front of his peers, the same 10 people he works with, to showcase what he had delivered from a testing perspective at the end of a sprint was nerve-wracking for him, right? Move forward 10 weeks. He was comfortably publicly speaking in front of the business, presenting test automation methodologies that the team had been deploying and working on. Right. So if you want to get good at public speaking or demonstrating things to your colleagues or friends or whoever it is, the showcase is critical. Be proud of your work. You've done the work, so you should be able to tell people about it. And the more you showcase, the better presenter you'll get. Anyway, sitting over the top of all of that is the retrospective, and we utilize the retrospective to execute continual improvement across our sprints, right? And we ultimately do that to say for each iteration or each sprint that we perform, we can deliver a known estimated amount of points. And because we're continually improving, we're delivering business value, but the amount of points that we can take on can accelerate because we're removing the blockers to our delivery. So, you might go from 10 points in week one to 14 points in week two, but you might find something really, really good and ideally get up to 21 points, et cetera, et cetera. So the high performance team evolves out of using the methodology and doing the continual improvement that comes out of the retrospectives. Right, so the retro is really, really critical to a high-performing agile team. So there we go. That's it. That's an introduction to agile. By no means is this a comprehensive course, but hopefully that's been distilled down into enough detail for you to make some sense of the terminology, the words, the framework, how it works, um, and what to expect from the software world when you walk into an agile environment. Um, and and hopefully all those terms just they become second nature and like you can instantly add value because you know what this stuff is. You shouldn't need any extra agile coaching. You should be able to walk into a team and go, all right, cool. Let's be part of estimation. What's the standard unit of measure? How many points are things? So those skills and knowledge should be second nature to you, especially in this current age of software development, because all we do realistically is agile methodology.
Thank you so much, Luke. It was a very informative and interesting information. I mean, myself really learned from the terms, and I'm going to unpack and go ahead with finding more about it. Coming with the biology, macrobiology background, this was just new language to me. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense because that is what we are practicing in our daily, weekly, monthly life and work. But yeah, thank you so much for this Agile workshop, which give us something to more explore and search and practice. And yeah, so with this, we come up to the end of this first workshop. We are looking forward to see you in the second workshop, which is going to be Adobe Figma or XD, how to create the mobile application. So in a week 4. So stay tuned. I'm coming with the announcement. And thank you so much again, Luke, and everyone who is attended and everyone who is going to watch this recording from here in Australia, and also the students back in Malaysia in Sarawak campus. Thank you so much. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Goodbye.
Bye.